Dear students, hearty welcome to an introduction to Dr. Ambedkar's speech at Mahad. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is a very familiar social reformer known to every one of us. He can be addressed a polymath. A polymath is someone who is exceptionally skilled in multiple talents. Okay, he was born into a Dalit Mahar family. We know him, he has many identities of his own. He was a social reformer, the chief architect of the Indian Constitution. He was a writer, a politician, and India's first minister of law and justice. We know him as a philosopher, as an economist, a jurist, and an anthropologist. Towards the end of his life, he became a Buddhist in the year 1956. So, when we think about Dr. Ambedkar's contribution, especially to the Indian society, we always cherish him basically for creating the whole Indian constitution. So, here in this context, we study about his intervention at a place called Mahad in Maharashtra. So we have a detailed study of his speech at Mahad. We, the students of literature, basically Indian literature, culture, and tradition, very often ignore many important aspects of India's social development, the socio cultural, political, as well as economic development of India. So, herein, we are actually trying to revisit those spaces that are very often left neglected very often by the dominant political structures, ideological structures in our society. So let us have a learning of the influence of Dr. Ambedkar, who made a great speech at Mahad, and this speech has been delivered in Marathi language, and we studied it in its English translation. This is one of the greatest speeches we come to see in the whole history of India, and which actually probably shaped the whole destiny of India. While Jawaharlal Nehru talked about the destiny of India, actually titled with his speech "The Tryst with Destiny" on the midnight of 15th of August in 1947. We find here Dr. Ambedkar, who delivers similar to Jawaharlal Nehru another speech at Mahad. Okay, and this is actually historical speech made by him in the year 1927 on 25th of December at Maharashtra, a place called Mahar near the Chaudhar Lake. And as part of the Mahad Satyagraha, Dr. Ambedkar was determined to bring revolutionary changes in the national life of India. The changes that he was trying to introduce in India were actually trying to shake the very basis of the roots of the socio-economic structure of India. And therefore, we call this an endeavor to effect revolutionary change in Indian society. And although he partly achieved this through the drafting of the Indian constitution, he has remained, the whole Indian constitution has remained the holy book for the last 70 more years. And so, after many years of Indian independence, we still cherish the contribution of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So, it was with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's intervention, the untouchables, the caste Hindus, were permitted to drink water from Chaudhar Lake. It was actually an attempt, an endeavor made by them in order to claim their human rights, in order to make others know that they are also human beings. The Dalits, okay, the Adishudras were also human beings. And with this act, they were permitted to drink water from the Chaudhar Lake. So, in India, we know that there existed a traditional social setup, and this traditional social setup was held under the tentacles of the caste-ridden graded inequality, and that was actually the basic structure of Indian society. Indian society was something like a pond of stagnant water, and Dr. Ambedkar wanted to bring a complete change, a complete revolutionary change in the social, economic, and political life of Indian society, especially amidst the dominant Hindu society. Dr. Ambedkar felt that he also experienced that there are many millions of people in India and they were deprived of even the basic human rights. And even today, we read in the newspapers that there are many examples of violation of basic human rights. And of course, they are related to our own livelihoods, related to our own basic needs of food, of clothes, of shelter. And we need a life with dignity, with some occupation, the basic rights of self assertion, and even the voting rights. So Ambedkar wanted to bring a complete change in the social, economic, and political life of Indian society. And he experienced this crisis even when he was suffering as he grew up as a child in his own traditional Indian society. And he also fought relentlessly for these rights till his last breath and succeeded in securing many rights, human rights, to the millions of Indians. So we find him as a great social reformer who led the whole Dalit movement at Mahad. Okay, so throughout this Dalit movement at Mahad, we find the establishment of the rights of Dalits who are permitted to drink water, draw water from the Chavdar Lake at Mahad, Maharashtra. And this conference actually took place on 19th and 20th of March 1927. And we find there were more than 10,000 delegates who participated in the whole Dalit movement. Participants were mainly from Gujarat as well as from Maharashtra. So we find an establishment of social justice enacted by Dr. Ambedkar. So, so throughout the entire life of Dr. Ambedkar, we find he was actually trying to reform the whole Indian society, and his presence can be regarded as the greatest Indian, the harbinger of human rights. He believed in a kind of democracy that is participatory, a kind of democracy that was not only a form of governance, but essentially a form of a society. He wanted a society that is based on democratic values, where everyone has the basic values that are ingrained in the democratic framework. The three key words, or rather the fourth word that Ambedkar regarded as very important, was justice, liberty, equality. And there is one more that is called fraternity. According to Ambedkar, all these three values, justice, liberty, equality, okay, can be claimed or realized only if we have the practice of fraternity. He regarded fraternity as the best word, and the most important word that will ensure justice, equality, and liberty. And he wanted to give it to the millions of Indians. And he was a gallant fighter against orthodoxy. He wanted to obtain these rights and became a pioneer in the achievement of the democratic politics in India. And we find it evident in the whole Indian constitution, the holy book. And we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a democratic, socialist, and republic, sovereign, secular type of republic that was enshrined in the whole Indian constitution. Herein, those important aspects of Ambedkar's speech were highlights on the importance of education that should be imparted to all sectors of Indian caste, including the Adishrudras, Dalit society. And he also emphasized on the importance of self-help, self-respect, self-knowledge among Dalits. So, in order to practice this, say there was a symbolic function. There was a burning of Manusmriti as a mark of Dalit protest against untouchability. So we find these values advocated by Ambedkar throughout his speech at Mahad. So whenever we just refer to the Indian Constitution, the basic principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, justice, and we should also consider the preamble to the Indian Constitution. So there are articles of faith, articles of democratic rule that are enshrined, and we find the influence of all these things through Mahad Satyagraha. And this was the first major movement undertaken by Ambedkar to realize his democratic principle that is based on an egalitarian society. Okay, and we find the political, social, and economic freedom, liberty, justice, and equality through these constitutional means. The people of India, should frame our own constitution, decide on the course of our life. So he also said that we, the people of India, cannot say if the majority of the parliamentarians decide that today at this present time the mode of governance we are going to follow will be socialist, or the nature of the state that we are going to have is sort of secular. So in a debate, Ambedkar said that we should not introduce these words in the preamble because we cannot get to know what might be the future of India. So throughout Mahad Satyagraha, we find a protest against the high class caste Hindus. So, in order to understand the nature of this protest, it is always good to get to know the structure of the caste system in India. So, why the high class caste Hindus were prohibited, or they prohibited Dalits, called Adishudras, in the society to draw water from Chaudhar Lake. Okay, but they had permitted all other people who belong to other religious practices. Okay, at least Adishudras had their birds and animals, and they were permitted to drink water from Chaudhar Lake. But the Dalits, especially the lower class society, Adishudras, were not permitted to drink water from Chaudhar Lake. So we find there is actually from the four caste system, a transition from the four caste system to the fifth one, that is the lower class people, Adishudras. The higher class caste Hindus were Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, and Shudras belonging to the fourth caste system. And beyond that, we have references to one more lower class Dalit caste people. They are Adishudras, who are actually addressed as the untouchables in society. So we refer to a type of society. Okay, and this society is based on hierarchical values. There are patriarchal values involved in it, and Ambedkar wanted to identify what are the root causes of the diseases of the entire Indian social setup, and he diagnosed it through scientific means. And he was actually trying to adopt many principles for revolutionary change by imitating, by finding out elements from French Revolution, American Revolution, and ideals of democracy that he had witnessed from the Western society. So he ultimately wanted to get removed from all the prohibitions by way of intermarriage or interdining, interdrinking, and social intercourse was about to be put into practice. So this is actually a symbolic act that they undertake nearby Chaudhar Lake. By simply drinking water from Chaudhar Lake, they wanted to establish their rights and wanted to get rid of all the prohibitions of marrying from one caste to other. Okay, so intermarriages were promoted. So we find that Ambedkar imported these ideas and combined many other ideas with the traditional ideas that were circulating all over India. In India, he found that society is primarily a feudal society, a society that is governed by religious norms. So, feudal and Brahminical patriarchal society that he found in the whole Indian society. So, this Brahminical feudal patriarchalism is actually based on graded inequality. So, Ambedkar said that fraternity can never be achieved in India. So, this brother, brother, sister, 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 brother equality can never be achieved in India without this basic word that he shared with us. Actually, the term on fraternity. Okay, so the basic structure of Indian society is feudal, is based on the superiority of caste, superiority of race, superiority of caste, and many other things. And we cannot achieve any kind of equality in the society without this element of fraternity. So Dalits wanted to claim their rights. So we need to address Dalits. They are also human beings, not immortal beings. Dalits also demanded equality with the other upper class caste Hindus. So they wanted to get rid of all their untouchability. And this was actually a protest similar to the French National Assembly. Okay. And we also find an appointment of a priest as the monopoly of the Pope in Rome. Actually, priests are to be referred or appointed by the will of the people. Okay, and we also see many influences of the Western proclamations, which abolish the autonomy of the religious orders. Okay, so Ambedkar was taking examples from the Western culture in order to compare the Indian society. And it is in this context we find that the Dalits cannot talk about justice when when they came near Chaudhar Lake. And this was actually the Chaudhar Lake was actually a large public utility lake in Maharashtra. And we find that they tried to establish their human rights rather than symbolically drinking water from the Chaudhar Lake. They wanted to claim all their human rights as we find in the Declaration of Human Rights practiced in Western society. So we find the establishment of as well as the Declaration of Human Rights in the third proclamation, and there were major agendas are enlisted here. There, all human beings are equal by birth. The second point, ultimate object of politics is to maintain human birth rights, and the entire nation is the mother source of sovereignty. These are actually the values shared by the Declaration of Human Rights found in the third proclamation. And any person is free to act according to one's birthright. The fifth point, the law will forbid actions injurious to society. Okay, the last and the sixth point is the right to decide what the law must be, and as it rests with the people and their representatives. Okay, so people, as in a democratic setup, do have all the rights to decide whatever is favorable to them. So the people who gathered nearby the Chaudhar Lake, there were also people who or drank water from the Chaudhar Lake. Besides these Adishudras, the people who belong to other religions, especially like Christianity, Islam, there were so other religions who had taken water from Chaudhar Lake. But only these Dalits, or the untouchables had been prohibited from taking water from the Chaudhar Lake. So we find they are actually these untouchables are addressed as Mahas. Originally, the original inhabitants of Maharashtra, and they were prohibited from using this water of the lake. So this Mahad Satyagraha was basically the uprising of the Mahas, of the untouchables of Maharashtra, against casteism in Indian society. where the caste dominance has turned these people as untouchables without giving them the entitlement to the basic use of natural resources in Maharashtra. And even today, we find this segregation in society or by means of caste lines. So we also find many examples from the Western society as they had practiced, as they tried to bring some kind of equality in the society. We find B.R. Ambedkar taking examples from the Roman culture, and they were actually divided as the upper class patricians and lower class plebeians. And they had also enlisted a chart of 12 laws, and out of these distinction of classes we find the emergence of two tribunes, one from plebeians and one from patricians. So he was actually trying to show to us the system of division available in the European societies. So the influence of a patrician priest, literally addressed as confratio, priests born of parents in Romans. So they were quite influential in making decisions in the society. But their decisions were actually influenced by the verdict at the oracle at Delphi. And the right to decide things by the priests at Delphi was taken into consideration. So this is actually an example that he quotes in order to bring how can we bring equality in Indian society. So we find throughout this speech many basic themes, especially with regard to the establishment of intermarriages for the practice of real equality in the society. Okay, so Brahmins actually enjoyed supremacy in caste system without the patriotism of the samurais of Japan. So these are examples he refers in order to refer to the system available in India. Maratha class between the privileged and those without any rights. So this class, Maratha class, is actually were not actually suffering from any kind of crisis. Actually, those sufferings were all attributed to untouchables. So we need to establish intermarriages for the practice of real equality in the society. So for this fourfold classification, actually as Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, or Shudras had to be abolished from the whole society. So we have to find all of them together. But Brahmins can never accept, especially Shudras or Adishudras, into for an intermarriage equality setup. So we find that the intellectual pursuits of the Brahmins and who shouldered all the responsibilities in the society. And they were actually trying to have a defense against all these kinds of atrocities in the society. So while Kshatriyas were actually addressed as people who were engaged in hunting or food gathering processes, okay, but other things like trade and commerce was given to Vaishyas, and there were other people who did many menial jobs as laborers in society, and those tasks were actually addressed to Shudras. And out of these four classes caste system, there were also another set of people who are known as the Adishudras, who actually managed to do all other tasks, who are addressed as untouchables. And so in Indian society, we find this caste ridden society, and we find a society which is practicing inequality, and people do not have access or opportunities entitlement or based on caste lines, and this remained for many years. We find inequality and untouchability in India. So this incident or speech at Mahad is actually a historical incident which took place nearby Chowdar Lake. This is an example from rural India where we have this discrimination, the violation of human rights, and the segregation of a major portion of Indian society. So in India, we find Dalits constitute more than 50% of Indian population. Like the other half, the females also in Indian society who constitute 50% of Indian population. And these people who belong to the 50% of Indian population form a majority, and they were actually treated as Dalits, like the women who also constitute 50% of Indian population. They are also considered as Dalits, and they are also, because of the traditional Indian way of life, they also led a life which, according to Ambedkar, is actually against the principles of inequality and untouchability. He shares with us a story of a farmer who waited for his neighbor's help for harvesting his ripe wheat. So, as he goes on waiting, so nobody comes to his assistance, and all his produce is about to be wasted. So, the story that he shared with us actually gives us the moral that if you wait for others' help to accomplish things in your life, so you are going to waste your life. The work may not be perhaps established or done to us. So we find that we, in order to, rather than seeking help from the Brahmins, the upper class caste people in India, it is better to act by the Adishudras or Dalits in the society. So untouchability, the whole action actually spoils the very existence of Dalits. And they were actually also suffering from the problems of unemployment, and they also require the establishment of a single caste for all Hindus rather than dividing the whole caste into either four or five groups. It's better to consider all of them together as a single caste. So equality is very often practiced in such a context. So equality should give equal privilege to men of equal merit, of course all comprehensive to both the genders, men as well as women. So we find the establishment of uh, the whole system, the Brahminic rule, especially with the whole of the rules and principles advocated in a Brahminic script titled Manusmriti. Okay, so the whole the basic structure of the caste Hindus actually is based on the whole code found in Manusmriti, which is regarded as the text. This text code of Manu has been translated by the British translators, the European translators, in most of the cases. They followed the text, and they were actually composed after the second century. And after the rule of King Pushyamitra, we find there are many translations of the text into English tradition, and there are many principles that we find in Indian society for a long period based on the fourfold caste system in India. And the fifth, Adishudra system that has been there in Indian society, relegating the people living in the margins of caste, margins of class, margins of gender, and they are found to be a deplorable state. So the speech at Mahad was actually occasioned by this ill treatment of the majority of population in Maharashtra, and this ill treatment was actually done to the Adishudras, the Dalits in the society. The Mahas of Maharashtra, the original inhabitants of Maharashtra, who were denied access to drink water from Mahad. So we find this element of Manusmriti. The bonfire of Manusmriti was quite intentional. It was a very cautious and a drastic step, but was taken with a view to forcing the attention of caste Hindus. At intervals, such drastic remedies are a necessity. If you do not knock at the door, none opens it. So we find these words of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar regarding Manusmriti. So, by destroying, so there was an act of a symbolic act of burning the whole holy scripture of Manusmriti. So by that they mean the abolition of the division of classes amidst caste Hindus in Indian society. So by reading this speech at Mahad, we try to understand the logic behind the intentions of the rationality of Dr. Ambedkar. We find that the Indian society has been developed, and we need to see revolutionary changes in Indian society. And this is actually a historical Dalit movement made by or initiated by Dr. Ambedkar, who actually began an agitation by Dalits to draw water from the Chaudhar Lake at Mahar. And the water of this lake was previously reserved for the caste Hindus. The caste Hindus are actually references to the Brahmins, upper class people in the society, the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas. And Shudras or Adishudras were denied access to drink water from Chaudhar Lake. The holy script Manusmriti is regarded as a holy text of the caste Hindus, and which was ceremoniously burned on this occasion of Mahad Satyagraha on 25th of December as a mark of Dalit protest against untouchability. There is one great moment in the history of Dalit movement in India, and we find that it is in this context Dr. Ambedkar delivered a speech at Mahad. And it was originally delivered in Marathi language, and this Marathi speech was later translated into English. Okay, wherein we highlight the need to develop one's own inborn qualities, the necessity of equal consideration and treatment of all caste Hindus, the uprooting and abolishing untouchability in the interest of the nation, and a real social revolution through peaceful means was these were the agenda of uh, the whole speech at Mahad. So, in order to revoke such an action, so all the Dalits, especially the Adishudras who had gathered nearby the Chaudhar Lake, they drank the water from the Chaudhar Lake. It was a ceremony, a kind of a religious ceremony, and they also burned Manusmriti. And this burning of Manusmriti was also regarded as a symbolic uprooting of the scripture on which the entire Hindu society was based. And we closely understand the speech and the contents of speech at Mahad as a revolutionary change suggested to Indian society. A revolutionary change with all principles of justice, liberty, equality, along with the fraternity, and which ensures all the citizens of India a world which is a caste graded. The whole world actually existed with inequality, but he demanded a world where there are grounds of equality, a world where everyone has equal access to opportunity, equal access under the law system. And in India, we can truly become a society based on democratic principles with the elements found on Ambedkar's speech. So, so Ambedkar, as a social thinker, basically made the Mahat Satyagraham, and he provided an opportunity for all Dalits in India in order to make a protest against all human violations, and they wanted to claim human rights in the society. So there were no discriminations possible, as even as Shudras or Adishudras, and they were actually provided education, and they were provided many social opportunities, especially employment opportunities, and public resources were shared amidst them with this act of symbolic act of drinking water from Chaudhar Lake. So this is actually a historical remark which actually plunged them into a social revolution. And we can certainly be proud that the social reformer Dr. Ambedkar established the principles of equality, justice, and liberty along with fraternity with his delivered message, speech at Mahad, which echoed throughout the hills, dales, and villages of Maharashtra. Okay, so he talked about many opportunities, which were unique opportunities for the Mahad community. So so there were many suggestions that Ambedkar put forward in order to bring the economically underprivileged society, the ostracized society. So he wanted to put an end to all the kinds of apartheid, and this is actually as an effect of an influence of Western agendas that he had witnessed in his life. So he wanted to bring a standardized life to the Indian society. So his principles of untouchability actually uh, paved the way for a kind of eradication of the whole caste system. And he demanded formal education even to the Adishudras, Dalits in society. Okay, so we find the whole speech at Mahad as a revolutionary step, as a social revolution, and it was also a kind of a political revolution, which can be considered as the hallmark of the whole Mahad movement. Okay, so one another important aspect that he has highlighted is the whole notion of endogamy. Okay, so we find that there were intermarriages possible with this movement. Okay, so because there were a lot of segregations taking place on the basis of caste, so intermarriages were to be promoted, and endogamy is actually was there because of the codes available in Manusmriti. So endogamy actually is actually concept of a marriage within the same class, and it was not possible to have marriages from same class if they wanted to practice intermarriages. So the whole idea of intercaste marriages was about to take place, and we find the influence of many of these principles into the life of the Adishudras, the Dalits in society, with the act of the purification process of the Indian society, with the historical speech made by Ambedkar, speech at Mahad. So this is my discussion on the contributions made by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Thank you very much for your kind listening.